Okay, thank you everybody for being here. I would like to now call this regular meeting of the Board of Trustees to order at 7:42 p.m. Can we please have the roll?
Village President Torpey.
Here.
Trustee Clark.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Davis Ford.
Here.
Trustee Robinson is absent. Trustee Rosner is absent. Trustee Schnall.
Here.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Lerner.
Here.
Mr. Rother.
Here.
Susan Caljean, present. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the press in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. In addition, notice of this meeting was posted in Village Hall and on the village website and has been filed in the office of the village clerk. Official action may be taken. Susan Caljean, village clerk.
Thank you. We're going to deviate from our normal agenda a little bit tonight. We've got a lot of folks here for our Villager of the Month ceremony and presentation, so I'd like to do that right away. So at this time, I would like to welcome up Michael Miner from the Community Relations Committee, who will be presenting this month's Villager of the Month.
I don't want my back to you. Truly, I don't want my back to you.
If you're a good judge of character, she's pretty tough.
Good check. Welcome, Board of Trustees, distinguished guests, CRC and community organizations that are here, villagers who are in attendance, who care and are part of the process. Reverend Dr. Terry Richardson, First Lady, and the First Baptist Church family. How do we color a man? What is the worth of a man? The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If we live in a community, we should do more than simply lay our head on a pillow there. We have to pay attention to what's going on. By paying attention, that is what makes a better community for everyone. Reverend Dr. Terry Richardson. You know, a young man arrived in moments of comfort and convenience to Temple University in Philadelphia, where his hopes and aspirations were to be a doctor. Now, I would suppose choosing that particular profession would be one, in his mind, of both comfort and convenience. Now, while studying, when he had free time, young Terry would walk the streets of Philadelphia, ministering one-on-one to office workers, members, and people walking up and down the street, and particularly those in greatest need, the homeless, seeing firsthand the challenges and the controversy that was embodied in their experience of simple day-to-day existence. Somewhere along that journey, as they say, a young Terry Richardson got the call. And that call would change the course trajectory of that young man's life forever. Now, he went on. He earned his BA in administration at Temple University. He married his college sweetheart, First Lady, Nadine. So I would suppose that if he was dating her around that time, she was probably witnessing that change in his life's trajectory. Some might say she may have been slightly directing that change in his life's trajectory, but I wasn't there. And I'm not here to gossip. But I'm married. The couple moved to New Jersey, where he then earned a master's and a doctorate at New Brunswick Theological Seminary. First serving as a young interim pastor just down the street a ways in Newark. In 1997, Terry Richardson, Pastor Richardson, was called to serve a very small congregation, about 60, 70 people, at what is the First Baptist Church of South Orange. Now, for those that don't know, just a little history. The church was formed in 1895 when a group of about 35 people, known as the Little Prayer Band, began meeting in the home of Mac Jackson on West South Orange Avenue in the village for the purpose of lifting their voices in praise to God. 1895? The First Baptist Church of South Orange is also known for shepherding and producing some of our nation's most dynamic servants. Some of you might recall the name of one of those servants, Reverend Leon Sullivan. And those who don't recall that name, I'll give you just a little history. Dr. Sullivan, who served the church in 1945, would go on to become the first African-American board member of General Motors, where he served there as a sitting board member for 20 years. In 1977, he would develop a code of conduct for companies who were operating at the time in South Africa called the Sullivan Principles. These principles were an alternative to what would have been complete disinvestment at the time in South Africa. Later lobbying GM and other large corporations to voluntarily withdraw from doing any business in South Africa under that system of apartheid. What some of you may not know is that working alongside Dr. Sullivan in Africa was our very own local Larry Branch, who may or may not be here with us this evening. The Sullivan Principles were presented to the United Nations, and the then Secretary, General Kofi Annan, had this to say about this preacher who was called and who had served at the First Baptist Church of South Orange. It shows how much one individual can do to change the lives and societies for the better. Now let's connect the dots. In 1997, while visiting the church, Reverend Sullivan struck up a small conversation with a young pastor. That conversation turned into a mentorship that lasted for several years. And that young pastor walked alongside both Larry Branch and Reverend Sullivan on many national and worldwide campaigns. So I know a large group is not very surprised at what they have at First Baptist Church, because he sat and rode the shoulders, the enormous shoulders, of incredible servants. These men who mentored him were no ordinary servants of God, and the gifts they imparted to him, this young, educated in Philadelphia pastor, these were no ordinary gifts. If we live in a community, we should do more than lay our head on a pillow there. We have to pay attention to what's going on, because paying attention is what makes a better community for everyone. Reverend Dr. Terry Richardson. Dr. Richardson's commitment to South Orange and the universe at large can be witnessed in the great accomplishments of the now well over 600 devoted, every Sunday, members of the First Baptist Church under his stewardship. Building wells to provide fresh water to the communities in Ghana. books and computers and equipment delivered to libraries in Africa, developing a school for girls in Swaziland, donating thousands of dollars to statewide and to international communities when they are in need. That is First Baptist Church of South Orange. That is Dr. Terry Richardson. Locally, the church helps to fund directly organizations that serve the local needs of our communities, right here. Health screenings, programs for women, victims of domestic violence, funding and supporting our very own South Orange Library, as well as our Community Coalition on Race. How do you color a man, and what is the worth of a man? Dr. Richardson and the First Baptist Church also formed the Eternal Light Communications Development Corp., a not-for-profit arm of the church that focuses on serving families in need, senior citizens, youth and adults, as well as the invisible population of men and women reentering society after incarceration. If we live in a community, we should do more than lay our head on a pillow. We have to pay attention to what's going on, because by paying attention, we make better communities for everyone. You know, when I speak to members of the South Orange community, when I speak to members of the church, I hear continual praise for the work and sacrifice of the Reverend Dr. Terry Richardson. Pastor Dave Clements colors his pastor this way. A community-oriented and focused man of faith, having a thirst for the elevation of people. A man dedicated in the service of God. I had a conversation with First Baptist board member Clarence Drake, who colored his pastor. A man who has surrendered himself to the will of God. A man committed to strengthening families. He said this: he is an authentic man. Dr. Terry Richardson's family, his daughter Kayla, sons Devin, and the Columbia High School sophomore Jeremiah, who I think is here with his dad today, along with First Lady of the church, Nadine. Now, I am convinced that on a daily basis you color your father for the totality of what he brings to your individual lives, your family, and the church family. Reverend Dr. Terry L. Richardson, would you please come forward? Reverend Dr. Terry L. Richardson, on this night, as witnessed by this distinguished Board of Trustees, the Community Relations Committee, villagers gathered here this evening, and your First Baptist Church of South Orange family, in recognition of the totality of service and sacrifice that you continue to gift to our community and the greater community at large. Reverend Dr. Terry L. Richardson, on behalf of the village of South Orange, we colored you March 2014 Villager of the Month.
Make sure they can see it too.
Wow. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. I'd like to say thank you to Michael. Literally, for a minute there, I got choked up in his introduction of me, and I really want to say to you, Michael, that no one could have done such a great job as you have in terms of introducing me where I choked up. I didn't realize you did a lot of research, and you must have spoke to a lot of different people in order to dig that up. Now my job is trying to figure out who you spoke with. But I really want to say thank you. I'd like to also thank the members of the South Orange Community Relations Committee for this recognition and as the esteemed Villager of the Month, realizing the prodigious profiles and accomplishments of those who preceded me. I am indeed honored. The committee feels that what I have contributed to this community based on my own passion that comes from my heart, I really appreciate this honor. I also like to thank and recognize the hard-working town trustees and to likewise give them thanks for allowing me to be dedicated and celebrated on this day. So I'd like to salute you and say thank you. But the ones who really deserve recognition and this honor tonight are the men, the women, the boys, and the girls of the First Baptist Church of South Orange, New Jersey. In fact, you need to give yourselves a hand, and I salute you and I say thank you. As Michael shared with us on tonight, First Baptist has such a rich history that I'm afraid not many of the villagers here in South Orange are aware of. He mentioned individuals like the late Dr. Leon Sullivan, who literally, after leaving First Baptist Church and bringing a vision actually to our church and to the township wasn't quite ready for that vision, but he took that vision with him to Philadelphia, where the rest is history, meeting every president since Lyndon Johnson, literally in the White House, and a mover and a shaker around the world. And he was the one who came up with the thought and the idea of how to end apartheid in South Africa. There were many models that were presented prior to him, but he is the one, based on his passion and his convictions, actually came up with that model. And as Michael said, yes, I had the opportunity to travel with him to Africa, where I got my first glimpse of what poverty really looks like outside of the United States. I also accompanied him, and along with Larry Branch also, to the United Nations. So I was there when he gave his global Sullivan principles to the world. There are men and women like former Olympian Clark, help me out. Joetta Clark, thank you. It wasn't around then, but Joetta Clark, men and women like the Vaughn family, and Alice Lewis, and Carol Bailey, and Dorothy Pons, who were the original individuals who came up with the thought to help South Orange improve or become socially aware with the social consciousness regarding fair housing. First Baptist has a very, very, very rich history that goes back to 1895. And these men and women who sit in the audience today are third and fourth generations of those individuals, and are very proud of our mark and our contribution to the South Orange community. I did my work at New Brunswick Theological Seminary, both my MDiv, master's, as well as my doctorate. And my dissertation is entitled First Baptist Church, a Case Study in Action, Reflection, Learning. The kind of learning that can only take place when we are really truthful and honest with our reality. And it consisted of me forming a covenant group of members from our community as well as the church. Those individuals took 2-3 years to interview members from this community, businessmen, businesswomen, everyday mom and pop. We went to coffee shops. We interviewed actually members from this board here. Alex, we interviewed congressmen or assemblymen, assemblywomen, everyday folks and simply members of this town, in order to get a heartbeat of what South Orange really is like. And we can only do that. We could only do that if we interviewed people from all walks of life and different faiths. And that's what we did. And that research gave us a clear picture that we wouldn't have otherwise unless we did the work. And it launched us, our ministry, into a new platform, if you will. Our focus went external like it never had before. Each of our departments that we call ministries at our church have a part of their own personal vision statement, a community component where they are responsible for identifying something in our community that affects everyone, whether it be heart disease, whether it be cancer or aging. And each of our ministries target something in our community that where we can collaborate with the community to help eradicate whatever affects us or threatens well-being for all people. That's the First Baptist Church that I'm proud of, and I'm proud to serve. And it wouldn't happen, and it can't happen unless we have people like the people who are sitting before you today in this auditorium. And I would like to salute them. I proudly accept this award on behalf of myself, on behalf of this ministry. Most important, the number one person I must give thanks for, that I can't be here without her, is my wife of 25 years, Nadine Elizabeth Richardson, who has produced 3 of the most wonderful children on the planet. 2 of our kids are away in college. One name you might recognize, that's Kayla Richardson. She was on that dynamic girls track team at Columbia, where she and that team went out to set records around the country and the world. We're proud of all of them, but I could not be here without that lady. She is one of the most gorgeous women you will ever see. And if you're wondering, I won't tell you who she is, but you can spot her out just by picking up on her beauty. We together, myself, my wife Nadine, our children Devin, Kayla, and Jeremiah, and the entire First Baptist Church are glad to receive this award of Villager of the Year from the South Orange Community Relations Committee. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson? Mr. Richardson, I have one thing to say. After your introduction by Mr. Minor and your presentation, there's only one thing left for me to say. Amen.
Thank you.
Wait, don't move yet. Where do you think you're going? Come on back, Reverend. So I do need to embarrass you just a little bit more. I think I'll note first that you see the true nature of a public servant and leader when you try and recognize him and he shares that credit with all the people that surround him. Next, as chair of the Public Safety Committee, I've had an opportunity to work with Terry, and when Mr. Minor had noted that he's community-oriented, us as a community, we have a lot of initiatives that deal with public safety, specifically the community and law enforcement. And we're launching a new Coffee with a Cop program that Alex is going to note in the announcements. And who was it but Terry that said we open our doors at First Baptist Church to host the initial launch of Coffee with a Cop with our South Orange Police Department. So I thank him for that. I thank him for being an incredible leader and for having the civic mindedness that you have to involve all aspects of this community in what you do at First Baptist Church.
Thank you. Thank you. It's our honor.
I'll echo Trustee Collins' statements. We've spoken a couple times over the years, and it's amazing to be able to see. I've lived in the Maplewood and South Orange community pretty much my whole life, and one of the things that I don't think that people who don't live here always understand about this community is that it is a community. It is also a village. It's also a township, oddly enough. But most importantly, it's a community. And people use the word community a lot to describe a place where people are. And as Michael pointed out in his remarks, and as you pointed out in yours, this community is, and what that word means, is something much greater than that. And I certainly appreciate the amount of passion that you have for trying to figure out what this word means, and not just what it means, but what does that mean? What is my responsibility as each of us in that? The idea of taking that much responsibility for yourself, for your community within the community, is certainly something that I think all of us value, and I certainly personally appreciate a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Normally, we let folks out who just come for a presentation, but tonight I think we're just going to keep you here for the full 3 hours. Is that okay with everybody? Our normal, we're going to break in just a second. Our normal operation for starting our meeting is we go into our closed session first and then come back. So we're going to go ahead and just read that motion out, and then we're going to convene in our executive session, come back out a half hour later, and then we'll begin the rest of the meeting. So if anybody does want to stick around, please feel free. So at this time, if we could have our one resolution to go into executive session.
Resolution 2015-57, resolution authorizing an executive session at the March 23, 2015 meeting of the Board of Trustees to discuss the following. 1, COA attorney-client privilege. 2, Orange Lawn attorney-client privilege. 3, redevelopment opportunities attorney-client privilege contracts.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Schnall, seconded by Trustee Column. All in favor? Any opposed, abstentions? Thank you. We'll be back here at about 8:40. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. I would like to call this meeting back to order at 8:44 p.m. Could we have the roll again?
Village President Torpe.
Here.
Trustee Clark.
Still here.
Trustee Collum.
Here.
Trustee Davis Ford.
Here.
Trustee Levinson and Trustee Rosner are absent. Trustee Schnall.
Here.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Lerner.
Here.
Mr. Rother.
Here.
Susan Caljean, present.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stay standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, I'll get us started with a couple of announcements tonight. First is Coffee with a Cop. Our community policing unit at the South Orange Police Department is encouraging groups of residents to meet informally with local officers to discuss a range of issues that are important to them. The Coffee with a Cop will be launched, I am told, tomorrow, and we're very excited about that. So the first meeting will be in April, is that correct?
That's correct.
And we'll announce the dates and times and locations starting tomorrow. And that's big thanks to the Police Department and the Public Safety Committee for organizing that. The Police Department has also asked that we make an announcement, some free services that the Police Department does offer that many folks in town are not aware of, which is protection for your home and property. You can set up any of these following two services by calling the Police Department at 973-763-3000, extension 7802. One is a home security survey, so who better to do an audit of your home security than one of our police officers. They'll assess things like your lighting, high hedges that burglars could use to hide behind, storage measures for valuable items, any accessible or unsecured wireless networks, home alarm systems, and things of that nature. They will come out to your house for free, and they will do that survey and let you know what improvements you could make. The second is bicycle registration. So you get your bike engraved with a unique serial number by the police department. The police will keep that number on file. So if you lose your bike or it gets stolen and it gets recovered, the police department can very easily get it back to its rightful owner. And I will actually just add randomly, as a child, for some reason living in Maplewood and South Orange and in college in a different state, I've always lost bikes. Every bike I have owned, I have either lost or has gotten stolen at one point, and none of them had serial numbers, and I wish I had known about this program when I was 10. So if you do have a bike and you ride it around and you leave it outside, make sure to put that serial number.
It's never too late, Alex. Get a bike.
It's true. I got to get a bike first, and then I will get it engraved. My childhood clearly is traumatic because of this, so don't do this to any of your children at home. Get your bike engraved. That should be the pitch.
Don't lose your motorcycle.
That's true.
That's a little bit
It's a little
more
different.
expensive.
Yeah. Also, the village expanded the File of Life program. The File of Life is an extremely helpful item. This is a program, it is something that you can keep in your home that consists of medical and personal information that provides critical information to first responders. As a first responder, also, I will say that these are very valuable, especially if you do have any medical conditions that are extremely important that a first responder should know about. These are really great. You put them in your kitchen, put them on their fridge, ideally. Some people don't have fridges. You can hang stuff somewhere nearby there. Make sure that it's somewhere easy to see. Whenever we go to a call, we always look in someone's kitchen, check out the fridge, and look around for the File of Life. And again, that does, when someone does have serious medical conditions, this is something that is really helpful. So if you are interested in that, you can contact our health department at 973-378-7715 at extension 7710. March Village Madness. So to honor Seton Hall's women's basketball team, the Village Center Alliance is presenting the March Village Madness, a promotion featuring brackets for 64 village businesses. Starting on March 19th and through April 6th, you spend as much money as you can in our local businesses and save your receipts. Whoever collects receipts from the most number of businesses by April 5th will win $500 in gift cards back to our South Orange merchants. So check out the information about that program. Really great way to support local businesses at sovillagecenter.org. And on a related note, South Orange Restaurant Week was rescheduled. The new dates are April 13th through April 19th. Restaurant Week is made possible through the generous support of Investors Bank and the Lichtman-Rabney team of Keller Williams. If you would like to find out more and some participating merchants that are offering great deals for Restaurant Week, you can go to sovillagecenter.org. So we already did our Villager of the Month presentation earlier.
Can I just add one more
Yes.
to the announcements? And we just got a notice of this a few minutes ago, is, as you know, we're having our first South Orange Seniors Prom on Sunday, April 12th. And I wanted to do a thank you to, we have a sorority, the Alpha Sigma Tau sorority at Seton Hall University will be doing the makeup that morning for all the seniors who will be attending the senior prom. So a special thanks to the students and the sorority sisters, and this is following all the great work that we saw from the fraternity that did the snow shoveling for seniors. So it seems like it's becoming a pretty good trend within the philanthropic side of Greek life on campus, is to focus a lot of their efforts on the senior citizens in our community.
Trustee Collin, would you like to also share with us what the door prize will be?
Trustee Rosner.
I think we're supposed to talk about things that will help encourage people to go.
When you're sick for a meeting, it happens.
That's what happens.
That will teach him to miss a meeting.
I will say, actually, just to add on to that note about the Seton Hall Greek Life, Trustee Column, is Friday night there was a concert at Seton Hall. The rescue squad always goes up and staffs a couple of ambulances up there. A number of the rescue squad members are Seton Hall students. They were talking about this program and were really excited about it. And it is definitely getting more and more part of the culture between the student government organization, the community groups, the Greek life, the athletic teams, the culture of like, hey, we were talking about community with the Villager of the Month before. And it's just kind of more and more part of the culture there, and it really is fantastic.
They're
I just
really
need to find
excited.
somebody to do my makeup, and we'll be all set.
Well, I think we just have to continue encouraging community groups to reach out to them, because I find that anytime you give one of these organizations or sororities or fraternities an opportunity to give back, they jump on it really, really fast. I mean, really, sometimes all it is the ask. And hopefully we'll continue moving in that direction.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, there's one other thing I will just say while we're talking about Seton Hall. I just need to look through my email for it. But this is another group of Seton Hall students. I just need to find all the information here. So this is in collaboration with St. Baldrick's, which is a foundation focused on raising awareness for childhood cancer. The RAs in Boland at Seton Hall have decided to work with them, and what they're doing, each of the RAs...
What does RA stand for?
a resident assistant. So each of the RAs are shaving their heads to show solidarity with some of the children that are going through cancer treatments, and they are doing that, or they did that this past weekend, and they were trying to raise money for the foundation. So we need to see how successful that was. They're trying to raise $250 per person. But again, this is just another great example. All the RAs at Seton Hall got together, and the students got involved and wanted to make this happen and raise some money for this organization. So I just want to make sure to thank them. It was Timothy Hughes, a student there, who had reached out about that. So it's just
great.
one more example of students just really doing amazing work at Seton Hall. So at this time, what I would like to do is open the meeting up for our first public comment period. So if
You can finish the volunteer summit.
maybe I'm missing something here. I'll take that right there. Thank you. So the our annual volunteer summit will be held Sunday, March 29th, from 2 to 4 p.m., and that is in the library?
It's actually at the SOPAC Loft. That's coordinated also by the Community Relations Committee, and this is an opportunity. It's for anybody who's interested in volunteering, but the primary focus of this volunteer summit is more for the organizations themselves. Volunteers are welcome to come out, but it's really a way for the various nonprofits, the service organizations, village committees, et cetera, to come out and learn best practices. There'll be demonstrations about a new software platform and an opportunity really to get to know the other nonprofits in the community. it's a good thing to.
An important note about that is there's obviously a lot of different community groups doing incredible work in town, and sometimes folks are doing so much work with their own organization, you forget that there's a lot of other people doing really great work. So that's really, like Trustee Schnall said, the goal of this particular event. With that, we can move on to our first public comment period. So if there's anybody who wishes to speak,
You want to talk about restaurant week?
I did.
Oh.
So if there's anybody who wishes to speak, if you'd like to come forward, and just please state your name and address for the record. And try to keep your comments to 3 minutes a person. And there, well,
No, down
that's
here.
also, yeah, there's one down, yeah, it's a little easier.
Just so the camera's on you.
Sorry? Sure.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Amy Fitzpatrick. I live at 179 West Fairview Avenue, South Orange. And my comments have to do with an agenda item that comes later on your agenda, which is regarding the redevelopment opportunities for Irvington Avenue and Valley Street. If it's okay, I'd like to address that earlier rather than later on the agenda. And I just have something I'd like to read, and then my neighbor and friend Mark will have some follow-up comments. Dear neighbors, we are residents in the vicinity of the proposed Seton Village high-density redevelopment. We came to the community forum a couple of weeks ago to discuss the redevelopment with open minds, and we support neighborhood-conscious smart growth in Seton Village. We encourage each of you to consider the proposed development in light of its potential impact on the low-density residential character of our community. Our goal is to raise important questions about whether the proposed high-density development is appropriate in the scale and context of this neighborhood block. The developers proposed a 70-plus unit, 4-story multifamily rental building and a 1.4-acre irregular lot. The majority of the proposed 4-story, approximately 57-foot structure would be located in the backyards of the West Fairview Titchener Village block, directly behind our single-family and two-family residences. The proposed building and parking lot would strip the single-family identity from West Fairview, Titchener Village, and other areas. We're not downtown South Orange. We have our own distinct neighborhood and residential character. This proposal would be unprecedented in our residential neighborhood because no other high-density building is tightly surrounded on all sides by single-family homes. It would set a dangerous precedent for new development in South Orange going forward. You may have received a summary of the recent community forum from the Seton Village Committee. It outlined useful information regarding next steps and ways to participate in the redevelopment planning process. However, there are still many serious questions and unaddressed concern from the community about the impact of the proposed development. We hope that you join the discussion. We'll keep you posted on any future meetings. We encourage you to reach out to us directly to get involved. Thank you, Seton Village residents, for positive change.
Thank you.
Awesome, I get new time. My name is Mark Ackerson. I'm a resident as well, living near what's now deemed Seton Village. I'm here tonight to listen, to pay attention, as Dr. Richardson would tell us to do, to participate and represent the neighborhood and the community. We're gathering one voice and want to communicate our interest, which is focused on making Seton Village a better place. So what I've handed out to you here tonight is kind of a summary of our 4 main kind of focus points. One is that we're interested in preserving green space. And want to reiterate the fact that undeveloped land, which is in some ways an invaluable resource, does not equal a neglected site or blighted site. Secondly, the impervious surface, or surfaces that allow water to penetrate through, is not ever going to be the same as a natural vegetated surface. Second main point is that we're interested in the best use of the land. Irvington Avenue, as you can see from the illustration I handed out to you, does not extend into the single and two-family zone districts. It's a long linear strip that runs along Irvington Avenue. Recent professional studies commissioned by this village have reiterated the fact that our overall zoning strategy still holds true today, is current, is not outdated. Seton Village is not downtown. The third point we want to talk about is that we're interested in positive change and development. We believe that development in the best interest of the community and the use of its land is what's important here, not a deal, not a developer. We have and hope to continue to support the Seton Village initiatives. There's been a lot going on in that area. We've all, whether through volunteer actions or participation there, have been very active in that. We hope to continue to do so. We hope that their vision aligns with the community's. And we believe that the development deal can be struck for this land with the right developer. Lastly, we believe in a holistic approach. We all know this town's changing. We all know that more and more people are coming here. And we believe that maybe, and I think this is already going on to some extent, that the Irvington Avenue corridor should be looked at, but in a holistic approach, not a piecemeal developer by developer approach. Proposal here, proposal there. We should concentrate and think of it as one unified body. This study should be done by the village, people hired that are professionals in expertise in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, seeing as there's nobody else who wishes to speak, I'll close public comments. Do we want to, are folks comfortable just moving the conversation from later on in the agenda up to now so we can address the concerns while the people that are here?
Especially, I don't think we should make them wait.
Sure. Yeah, because that's going to come much later.
Sure.
Much later, depending on who's giving reports. So there was a couple different concerns that were raised in those comments. I think in the course of the discussion, hopefully we can do our best to address those, and I've also made a note of a couple of them here. So I don't know who is planning on leading off that conversation later tonight.
Why don't I just start on a couple upcoming meetings for the folks who came tonight? So let me pull that up. Okay, so after the community forum had taken place, some of the residents who attended the forum came to our development committee meeting, which was shortly after that. The development committee is an advisory to the Board of Trustees, but it's comprised of professionals in the field of development. We have developers, architects, real estate folks, and they basically represent the interest of the residents. They are kind of just advisors to the governing body, also work with our professionals and provide us things behind the scenes that we may not know unless we work in that industry. So when the resident came forward and voiced some of his concerns, I suggested to this advisory committee, especially for the most adjacent neighbors, that perhaps the forum wasn't the best place to sit one-on-one and answer specific questions. So without the developer there, he is certainly not invited to attend this. This is meant for the residents and the development committee to talk through some of the things that you heard at that meeting. And this meeting, it's going to be a special meeting of the development committee because they wanted to do it sooner rather than later. They scheduled that for Thursday, April 2nd at 7 o'clock, and that's in 76 South Orange Avenue in our third floor conference room. And notices will be going out to the immediate neighbors to come to that meeting and have more a one-on-one. And then along those lines, and obviously you're familiar with the Seton Village Committee, they have their regularly scheduled meeting coming up this Wednesday in the same location. So there's kind of two more opportunities to meet with people who are interested in this. And I think it's very positive to actually have this type of feedback. I think that's why very quickly out of the gate, when we learned of somebody who had acquired some property, we asked them to have this community meeting as soon as possible and start gathering the feedback. So everything that happened at that meeting, I think he understands, both the partners understand, and definitely I know the Board of Trustees heard a lot of those concerns there as well. And so we look forward to continuing working with the neighborhood and also the Seton Village Committee on the property and the things that you outlined are important to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's important for all of us that we're approaching this with a very holistic approach, not just on Irvington Ave, but also the entire town. And not just the entire town, but looking at what the trends are regionally as well, where population growths are trending, which seems to tend to be around, transit-focused suburbs, first suburbs, older suburbs like ours. And I think we're all very interested in making sure that we do approach this, in as smart and as holistic of a way as possible. An interesting tidbit I picked up that's a little bit of a side note, but from at a conference recently, where I was speaking with a couple developers, where I was there speaking about some of the work that we were doing in South Orange, and a couple developers, I was chatting with them, and they made an interesting point about the reputation that South Orange has as a community to develop in, which is very different than what it was a few years ago, which was that there were roadblocks potentially, that it was not a community that was really interested in engaging with the idea of growing the community, and I think that we figured out a way to start to do that in a way that makes sense for what our community needs are. But what was interesting was that it wasn't, there are some places where developers kind of flock to, and it's like, well, we're just going to go to these towns and build whatever we want, but there was a specific point that was made that there are developers that are unwilling to work in South Orange because to work in South Orange, you are required to go through a fairly rigorous community engagement process. And I thought that was kind of funny that was our reputation, and that some people actually saw that as a bad thing. It was like, well, we don't want to do work in South Orange because you have to go to all these committee meetings, and it's like, well, fine, then we don't want you to do work in South Orange. Because there are plenty of people who understand the value of going to the meetings, having the conversations, and so hopefully we can continue that. I don't know if there was more that we wanted to talk about that was a feedback, or if someone wants to give a summary from the community forum, or if there were a couple issues that we wanted to make sure to address tonight as part of the discussion item that was added to the agenda.
Well, one of the things on the discussion item that I wanted to address, I think, was sort of the procedural posture and where we're at now, where we're going, what the next steps are. I don't know that I'm comfortable sort of, because I don't want to try and characterize what the concerns of the forum were, but I can certainly sort of summarize my take on them later. But one of the things I was asked to, and was happy to appear at the forum, specifically for those who were there, to explain the process, where we're at in the process, some of the legal hoops, but also to make clear that what was being presented was purely the developer's sort of concept plan, which we had seen slightly before that, but we had no hand in preparing, and in no way has the board vetted it, approved it, et cetera. It's a starting point when an entity gets control of properties, which they have these properties under contract. They come up with a concept, they present it, and that sort of starts the process. We are in a position now with the recent rehabilitation designation that provides us the opportunity to approach projects on a very individualized case-by-case basis through a redevelopment plan. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that a redevelopment plan, as authorized under the local redevelopment and housing law, is not, I think there's a perception that it's some sort of a unique one-on-one negotiation, and it's absolutely not that. What it is an opportunity to have much greater control over a project with all the same procedural and public hearing and notice and due process type requirements as you would if you did a zoning ordinance. So a redevelopment plan, if you get to that point, has to be adopted by ordinance, so it's subject to the same as just if you did a zoning ordinance. There's notice, it's introduced, it gets referred to the planning board. The planning board has to review it for consistency with the master plan and provide their feedback. It comes back to there's individual notice to affected property owners, notice in the newspaper, there's a public hearing before the board. So all those procedural safeguards and opportunities for input from the public exist. In addition to that, there are much greater opportunities to have very specific control over projects, including aesthetics and things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to kind of incorporate into a zoning ordinance. So I think that's one of the reasons that we were interested in looking at that tool, because of the additional level of control that we would have. At this point, the developer has put out their concept plan. As Trustee Collum indicated, it'll be now next discussed, I think, with the Development Committee. The Seton Village Committee that does meet Wednesday, I'm sure will, perhaps have some discussion and some feedback. They're not really land use professionals. They're business owners, residents, property owners, but, I think have a good representative cross-section to kind of, and most of them live in the neighborhood, and then so they're a good sort of sounding board for what the neighborhood thinks and what are they hearing. The more technical land use component of it, I would say, would be at the Development Committee meeting. I would certainly envision there will be discussion at the Trustee Planning and Zoning Committee meeting as well, which I don't have that date in front of me, but this will certainly be a very deliberative process. Procedurally, the next sort of procedural step to kick off to some degree would be recognizing this particular entity because they have the properties under contract through what's called a conditional designation of redeveloper. That only recognizes that they are either the owners or have the right and authorization from the owners to sort of step forward and say we're in a position to talk about a potential project on this property. By doing that, that sort of starts the formal ability to start trying to decide if there's a plan that is acceptable to everybody, can be reached. It also has certain provisions where they will then cover the village's expenses in doing that undertaking, with the idea being that the broad taxpayer base shouldn't necessarily have to pay the cost for the town's professionals to meet with a developer who wants to do a project. So that's sort of one step in the process. We would anticipate recommending that to the board, likely for the next meeting. Again, that is not endorsing any particular project. It's simply recognizing that that property owner or contract purchaser is the individual that we're going to, or company that we're going to discuss with and see if there's a project that could be done that meets all the needs of the village, the neighborhood, sound planning, and good land use policies. So that's sort of where it stands right now. I would certainly encourage residents to avail themselves of the opportunities to go to the Development Committee meeting, to the Seton Village meeting.
Could you just reiterate those dates and times?
Sure. April 2nd is going to be the special meeting of the Development Committee. And this is chaired by Rob Cole, and this is at 7 o'clock, a start time of 7 o'clock, and it's already on the village calendar. And the other one is the Seton Village Committee, which is this Wednesday at 7:30 in the same location, 76 South Orange Avenue, third floor conference room.
Great. And the April 2nd is a week from this Thursday, so it's next Thursday evening.
And we did have the contact information for the gentleman who came to the Development Committee, and so he said he would help us distribute, because he's one of the properties right up against the development.
Okay.
So.
And if any of you who did speak, or if anyone here does want more information, just you can leave your email address with us, and one of us will make sure to get in touch with you and just basically send you the information that we just announced of when the meetings are. You can make sure to get to
the
that.
other thing is, if there's anything specific in terms of questions that anybody in the neighborhood wants to ask, I mean, you could certainly email anybody on the Board of Trustees, and we generally send it to our administrator. If there's something that deals with the development, we need to bring in redevelopment council. We like making sure information is going back and forth.
Can't talk.
Sorry, yeah, we can't get into a big, real back and forth here at
He
this
flashes the light in
point,
back because
people
the
at home
public
can't
can't.
hear,
The
and
microphone, they can hear you.
we kind of have to do it through the public comment period. But like Trustee Collins said, if there's any questions that we can get in, we'll definitely make sure to address those. And if you leave your contact information, we will definitely get back to you as well.
Yeah, and certainly I've fielded already questions. I did. Anyone who was at the forum, I stated at the beginning, and I've received questions from people. I've answered them. I'm happy to answer them to the best I can. Certainly comments. I would encourage comments. We'll do the best we can to kind of take them to heart, but that's always, I think, better expressed at public meetings and rather than just in an email. And certainly legally, when you get to either planning board and that, then sort of written petitions and comments are, in some instances, not even admissible. It's got to be live sort of testimony, if you will.
And by doing that, it's also advantageous to everybody else. In a public meeting, so you don't have to repeat the same thing 5 times. Everybody else can learn, so it's really the best way to do it.
And everyone's email address is on the website, so.
The other thing that I would encourage the board to look at, and this isn't a typical parcel of land that you would find in South Orange. If you notice throughout the vision plan too, there was different areas that were highlighted for potential improvements. This lot is one of those, but it is in a shape where normally in a business corridor, this is a county road right here. We just finished doing the Together North Jersey report with surrounding municipalities. We submitted for a Department of Transportation grant. You have traffic there. You have what the vision plan called a neighborhood retail district, where it was really supposed to capitalize on all the surrounding homes, the traffic from Seton Hall University to come and support these businesses. If you notice, especially this drawing really highlights it, is that the commercial corridor, for the most part, it's typical. And then when you get to this proposed lot, you have a really odd shape where what will front as a commercial property and be obviously of benefit for the actual business corridor does naturally encroach into the backyards of what is a single-family zone. So a lot of the things that we need to be thinking about and working with our professionals on is it the appropriate use, and then also the setbacks, all these different things, because a lot of people, at least the ones that I spoke to from the forum, is that it's not, density is just a number. Whether you say X number of units, more or less, a lot of it is really how something is designed. When somebody looks in their backyard, what's there, what used to be there, and what is potentially going to be there. So as we work with the development committee and the developers, who I will add again, these are local developers who live in the neighborhood, who have roots in South Orange, so we're not dealing with somebody who's trying to capitalize on all the energy and then, as some have suggested, leave South Orange, not really have the investment in what we're trying to build over on Irvington Avenue. Having them play a role, an important role, in understanding what these concerns are, and having us go back to not just the vision plan, but our smart growth plan, and also really work with all these people who surround this property on, can this development work in any shape or form? As you know, right now we've had issues with the property. It's been submitted for code enforcement right now. There was, a couch in the yard. It is open space, but something isn't necessarily open space forever. And so they are under contract for the property, but at least I can say that it appears from their willingness to jump into the community pretty quickly, with focus groups also coming to a community forum where you're kind of putting yourself out there and saying, give me all your feedback. They do seem like they're very willing to want to work with people, work with the board, and work in the best interest of really improving the corridor. So check out those documents. We'll hear back from the administrator. We'll, hopefully move forward with designating them the conditional redeveloper, because that's their right. And then we'll work with the neighborhood and move forward from the development committee meeting and see where we are by next month.
Great. And I'm sorry to be a wet blanket, but we can't really get into a back and forth because we have to do it during the state law requires we do it fairly just during the public comment period. So
we do have another one.
We do have another public comment period if you want to hang out for a bit. Also, if you want to follow up with any of us after the meeting, or send us an email, or the development committee, or the VCA. I can't grant any one person because we never allow that. So sorry. But yeah, if you can contact us, or if you want to hang out to the second public comment period, we can try and address those concerns there. Okay. So is there anything else for this particular discussion item? Nope. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our approval of minutes. We've got minutes from the February 9th and February 23rd meetings.
I move that we accept them.
Okay. Moved by Trustee Schnall.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Column. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Let's move on to our ordinances for first reading.
Ordinances for first reading, 2015-04, reintroduction and first reading of a bond ordinance authorizing capital improvements by and for the Township of South Orange Village in the County of Essex, New Jersey, appropriating an aggregate amount of $2,575,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of not exceeding $2,446,250 in aggregate principal amount of bonds or notes to finance part of the cost thereof.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, is there anything that you want to add here?
Yeah, no, this, again, it's just a reintroduction. There was a technical glitch, and our bond counsel advised that we reintroduce it for legal reasons.
Okay. Unless there's any other questions or comments from the board, do you have a motion?
I move.
Moved by Trustee Schnall.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Clark.
Wow.
Do the roll, please.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis-Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson and Trustee Rosner are absent. Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Thank you.
I move that ordinance 2015.
We've still got one more.
No,
Oh.
she has to read that, because that's on a different time frame than the other ones.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And did you get my yes vote? Okay. I move that ordinance 2015-04 be scheduled for a second reading and final passage at the April 13th, 2015 board meeting, and a public hearing be held at that time. For reference ordinance, the village clerk has been authorized to take the necessary actions to publish public notice for such hearing.
Okay, moved by Trustee Davis-Ford.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Column. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2015-06, introduction and first reading of an ordinance to require that government records and information be made available in transparent and accessible formats and setting other open government privacy provisions.
Okay, so this was supposed to be discussed in the legal committee, but we didn't get a chance to do that tonight. So what I'm going to do is run through the ordinance quickly right now.
Can I just save you a little time? This is something that really should be vetted in the Legal and Personnel Committee, and I'm going to suggest that we table this and direct this to the committee, because this is something that really should be vetted as an ordinance.
I know, but it's been canceled 3 times. So what I'd like to do is give a brief overview. So I don't know when the next legal committee is going to be and if that one will be held or will be canceled. But this has been kind of going on for a couple months at this point. And so instead of having the discussion in the legal committee, we can just have the discussion here. And if there are any questions that need to take it back to the legal committee, we should definitely do that. But this shouldn't be too complicated. So this is something that I brought up during my announcements a couple times. And I'm going to go through, I'm not going to read through every word here, but I'm going to give a brief overview of what this ordinance does. There are a couple different sections of this ordinance. So this is an open government, open data ordinance, and I will go through each of the sections here. So one is a provision that requires the maintaining of records to be in a digital machine-readable format. So that machine-readable format basically means that things can be searched, that basically things aren't printed out and scanned into an image where they can't be searched at any later point. This is going to very easily come with an upgrade to a records management system, Laserfiche, that we already have and are implementing that upgrade. So within 2 years of the adoption of the ordinance, all the government records, which is the same definition the state uses for government records, but does not require that they be stored in a machine-readable format, in South Orange would have to be stored in that machine-readable format. Next is a provision about making records accessible to the public. And so these specify certain records that need to be not just be maintained in a machine-readable format, but actually publicly listed on the website proactively. So that's something that we have done a lot of in South Orange over the years and have found that reduces the number of OPA requests that we get, is if information that people might want to request is just publicly available on the website. So there's a couple different documents that would be subject to, again, not just being stored in a machine-readable format, but be publicly available for anybody to see at any time. Contact information or method to contact each of the elected and appointed officials of the town and the administration and the clerk, the municipal court administrator, and all the department heads. The adopted budget and 3 years of prior budgets. Within 1 week of becoming a public record, meaning when they get approved. Any agendas, minutes, or resolutions or ordinances or anything of that nature. All notifications and submission requests for RFQs, RFPs. All competitively quoted contracts. So if something does not exceed the amount where something is required to bid, but does exceed $5,000, so it's competitively quoted instead of bid, that would have to be listed on the site. The village's most recent annual financial statements and audits, employees' salaries with previous year's overtime, any final and accepted report, study, or presentation, or any other work product produced by a third party for us, all completed OPRA requests and responses, and then any publicly available documents that relate to emergency preparedness or emergency response plans, or any reports or analysis that were done on that subject. Next is enhancing the Open Public Records Act process, and so this is doing a couple things. So when the request comes in, the idea is that the person gets the response back in a machine-readable format, which we do try and do now. And I will say, and perhaps I should have led with this in the beginning, the brief history here is we do a lot of these things already, but they have never been codified by ordinance into law. So it's just the best practices that this governing body is interested in doing these things, and we'll get to some of those later too. But it makes sense to obviously put that into law so that anybody anybody after, wearing these seats understands what the expectation of them is from a transparency and from a technology standpoint. So I contacted the Sunlight Foundation and the Citizens Campaign, which are nonprofit organizations that work in the government transparency space. We started working on ordinances based on laws from other counties and areas in the country. We discussed them there, started to bring it down about what would specifically make sense in New Jersey. And then between myself, our clerk, our legal team, and our administrator, we went through all of these one by one and made sure that everything fit South Orange. And made sure we addressed a number of concerns we had about provisions that didn't make sense or were too broad or too specific. And so what we have has been vetted through some of these organizations, been vetted through our staff, through a series of meetings, and then now is before the board. So that was just a little bit of that history there, again, trying to codify a lot of what we already do. So for the Oprah responses, or the Oprah requests and responses, all the requests and responses would be made available on the website for anybody to see, so that if somebody wanted to view someone else's Oprah request and response, instead of having to file a second one, they could just go to the website and see and just download that document right there. When the response is provided, it would and there would be basically one spreadsheet. That spreadsheet will contain the date the request was submitted, the number count of the request, so how many have, is this request number 10 or 20 or 50 for the year, the name of the requester, the number of hours undertaken for staff to fulfill the request, the date the response was given, and then a link to the complete document that was the response that was provided. So that also helps keep us accountable too, which is that these responses are required to be filled within 7 business days, and you'll be able to see when they were put in and when the response was. And the last point there is that the response will be provided in one document, a machine-readable format, with a cover sheet, with watermark page numbers and a URL to all the other Oprah responses that you can find on the website. So everybody gets a complete package. It's very clear. Every response is the same consistent format. So it's with an exception that, for example, some planning documents and things like that that are huge pieces of paper that are very difficult to scan and put into those formats, that if for some reason there's a reason why something couldn't be provided in that format, there's an exception to allow for that. The fourth section is increasing protections for citizen privacy. This is a very small detail, something we started doing, but is actually really important, especially out of all these conversations about elected officials and whether they use their public email or private email or things of that nature. A lot of folks don't know that if you email any of us for any reason, that email is by default a public document. I've had people ask me questions before. They say, can I email you something in confidence? I am not allowed to decide. Obviously, an elected official can't decide what is in confidence or not. Otherwise, someone doing bad things would just say, well, everything's in confidence. So we do not have the power to make that decision. There are exceptions in the law that in very rare circumstances would be applied from a citizen to one of us. More so are when our attorney is sending us confidential legal memorandums and things of that nature. Or if we're discussing, if there's a memo on a personnel matter or something of that. But from a citizen to public, most people don't know that that is a public document. So what we did, and now this would be codified, is that any email sent from any town employee or official would have this disclaimer that everybody's now used to, that fully informs the member of the public that this is a public document and that this correspondence is subject to the Open Public Records Act. And any social media accounts or internet platforms, like the Peak Democracy discussion platform that we'll be launching, that any of those conversations or interactions with us through a social media through an official social media platform would also be subject to the Open Public Records Act. So if someone tweets at South Orange and, I don't know, they have a protected Twitter account, that doesn't matter. That is now a public document, and people should know that. So again, we do that, but this would codify it. So next is increasing accountability of our governing body meetings. These are all things that we pretty much already do, but this came out of a conversation with Seton Hall students with a leadership workshop that they organized at Seton Hall. Several of us went to discuss basically looking at national level issues and how we can work on them in a local capacity. And one of the things we talked about was civic engagement. And what some of the students said is they've gone to council meetings and of other towns, and they'll make their comments, and the comments are just not addressed by any of the elected officials. They just do the public comment period, you get your 3 minutes, and then they move on to the next item without addressing any of the public comments that are brought up, which is actually not that uncommon, which is a shame. And so I went through and looked through the law again, and I was like, well, that's funny. It does not require that we actually address public comments at all. And we always do, and understandably, it's not in a great interactive format, but we do try and make sure that any comment that is brought up, we do address in the meeting, or get the person's information, send it back. So we thought it would make sense to write into law that at the conclusion of any public comment period, of any public meeting of the governing body, at the direction of the village president, the governing body make its best effort at addressing each of the concerns raised by a member of the public during such a public comment period. So it would be requiring that we do what we can to try and address those comments, and right now there's no requirement at all. This also codifies 2 public comment periods. There used to only be 1 in the governing body meeting, so now there's 1 before we take action and 1 after we take any action, so this would codify that. This would also put attendance records of all meetings, of all governing body members, so just the Board of Trustee meetings, to be posted on the website, updated after each meeting. And it would also create a spreadsheet for the voting records of all of the members of the governing body. That would be updated on the website in a spreadsheet as well. So these are things that we've actually already got the spreadsheets together in the format. We just haven't actually put them out yet. Section 6 is an oversight and implementation section, which just talks about that the clerk is, or whoever is the custodian of records is still going to be that person maintaining the record. Within 60 days of the passage of this ordinance, the administration will promulgate some sort of operating procedures talking about how everything will be implemented, and if there are any red flags or concerns with that, which there shouldn't be here because we've already gotten over all of it. That once per year or more, as directed by the governing body, the village president would provide a written report to the status of the implementation of this ordinance. If there are documents that for some reason could not be made machine readable, if there were any problems that run into, that the village president would be required to let the governing body know, things are going well, here's what we're working on, etc. And importantly, there's a provision that if for some reason there is a requirement in here that is somehow impractical or too expensive or infeasible to do, that only a 2/3 vote of the Board of Trustees could allow the board to put off for 1 year implementing whatever that thing is. So if that weren't in there, theoretically, it could be a simple majority. So this ups the ante a little bit, the same way that we have to vote and pass our budget by a 2/3 majority. The Citizens Campaign, a few others, thought that it would be wise to put a provision in that required that it be a 2/3 vote of the governing body. And in the publication of the resolution, they have to set forth in writing the reason why they are waiving that particular requirement. So that provides some level of accountability in case we've somehow missed something and something is impossible to implement, that it is possible to do that. It just has to be a 2/3 majority, and you have to put in the resolution the reason why.
And it only defers for 1 year.
Right, and it defers for 1 year. So then at the next year, you'd have to either put it back, or you'd have to either do it, or you'd have to do that process again. So the idea is to make it difficult to not do parts of the ordinance. So that's basically it, and there's a couple other very technical things. Again, most of these things we already do. A couple of them we've discussed, and we've gotten to the point, like with the Oprah requests and the attendance and voting records, where we're kind of ready to do them. And then there's a couple with, as far as putting documents into a machine-readable format, that we're doing as new documents come in and as we upgrade the way that we do our agenda and as we upgrade the way that we store our records. And this allows for a year to be able to put those in place. So it doesn't say you have to do it all tomorrow, because that would be impossible, but especially as new documents come in, they have to be stored in that format. So we don't have to go back to, 1869 when South Orange was founded and start to put everything in a machine-readable format, but any new documents that are public documents or government records as specified by state statute would be kept in a machine-readable format, which is basically the way that we have defined it, is an open document format that can be retrieved, downloaded, indexed, sorted, searched, and reused by commonly used web search or other applications and commonly used open format software that facilitates access to and the reuse of such information. So that could be a Word document that's saved in a PDF the correct way, or it could be an actual machine-readable format, like a JSON file, which is not something that a human would read, but is a technical format, or it could be a spreadsheet, but whatever it is, it has to be able to be
What was that word
searched.
again?
JSON. It's
Learn something new every day.
So there are plenty of files that databases use, and so we could use those formats. Or, for example, with our agenda, there's no way to put that into that format. We just need to make sure it's in a PDF that can be searched and the text can be copied out of. So that's that. It's something I'm super excited about. It's a lot of conversations have gone into it. So that was the overview that I would have given in the legal committee had we had the chance to meet. So I don't know if at this point anybody's had a chance to review or if there are any questions.
I move that we table this and refer this back to the legal committee to be vetted by the legal committee, and then we can advise as our opinion on this ordinance.
Can we, before we do that motion, can we ask just a couple questions for
Sure.
probably the benefit of the public? So
Sure.
we'll hold that motion for a second. This is, I Googled it, so I figured out what it was, but for the benefit of the public, I think too, when you refer to machine readable and what we do currently right now when we scan documents, can you get to the very basic,
Yeah, I mean, the most basic distinction is that you can scan a document into a PDF, for
Okay.
instance, and you can scan it, and the way most programs will do it by default is into an image. Right, so
Okay.
the PDF is an image, and you can't search it. In our Laserfish system, it will OCR those documents and turn images into text. But it does not do that with 100% accuracy. If anybody's tried to copy and paste out of something in Laserfish, you might find some of the words are jumbled and things of that nature because it's a manual process, it's an
let
algorithm.
me use this as an example. The document or the paper that we were just given, if we wanted this posted or it was a part attachment to our minutes of the meeting, do we have the capability to scan this so it can be searched?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
We have the equipment to be
Yeah.
able to do that.
It's not equipment, it's software.
It's software
You
that
need-
will
you need a
turn this
scanner.
into something that's
You need a
searchable.
scanner, yeah, and the software you have to tell the software to turn it into a text-based PDF, not an image-based PDF.
And so just to be clear, what happens is the text on that form, OCR stands for optical character recognition, I believe. So the text is searchable. Obviously, the picture would not be. So of that document, you could, if there were certain words that you wanted to see, such as development, you could search for that and find that. The image is still just an image, the picture of the map, let's say.
In
Right, so
terms
maybe-
of,
Go ahead.
I got that. In terms of just the, when people, I think when the budget tool was launched, one of the concerns was when you don't lock documents and you give people the ability to manipulate, what stops somebody from manipulating real facts and then PDFing their own version of what they want to portray as facts and then allowing that to kind of get out to the public? How would you address somebody who wants to manipulate to learn and understand versus somebody who wants to manipulate and then misrepresent what the actual budget as proposed is?
So that's a great question, and that actually did happen with several OPA requests that residents had filed and taken individual pages out of the OPA request and basically reused that and said, well, this is the response. And it's like, well, that wasn't the response. This whole thing was the response, and you've just actually very much misled other members of the public into thinking that the response was something different than it was. So there's a couple things. One is that any of the documents that are official village documents will be on our servers, right? There is one way, it's very easy to know whether it is the official version or not, which is go to the website and is that the document, right? If someone's circulating a document that's their own document, I suppose anyone can do that, but any budget information, any code anything at all would be in our Laserfish record management system and would be available to members of the public so that you could basically send the URL, say, go look at this PDF, and they're downloading it from the village website, so you'd know that. As far as the OPA requests and responses go, that's part of the reason why the idea is to structure it in the format where you put everything into one document. Well, it's more organized, right? Instead of getting a whole bunch of, scattered, emails and different files and stuff. Some of the OPA requests, when lots of emails got requested, people would get like 200 files back, which is just a lot to look at.
And it kept repeating the same trail.
And that is very
was
messy and
awful.
disorganized and hard to actually understand the response that was provided because it's too much information. And so consolidating that into one document and then watermarking each of those pages and saying, if you want to view this document, it's at this URL, I think that would 100% prevent some sort of, undue manipulation of those documents. You can't stop anyone from downloading the spreadsheet of the budget, and then reposting it somewhere and saying, this is the town budget, isn't this crazy? I would hope that people are smart enough to know that if something looks insane and doesn't make sense, to go check the original source. And find, and as long as we make that information available, right, if we don't make the information available easily on the website, and someone is circulating some document that doesn't make sense, it's not that crazy to think that someone might see a document and not be able to find the original, and then not really know what to do. So that's part of our responsibility of making all these documents easily available on the website. So if someone circulates something and this doesn't look right, I'm going to go to the website, it's right there. Hey, this is very different than what's there. What's happening?
Yeah.
So ideally that would happen very quickly. And Mr. Lerner looks like he wants to say something.
No, I would just to confirm, I guess the state of New Jersey's Department of their Treasury, the Artemis, which is a record for retention, we keep everything in a TIFF format, which is an image format that is still OCR'd, so that it can still be searched but cannot be manipulated. So once it goes into our retention files, it's there for a certain period, and we'd have to follow the state guidelines on, what we do with it after a certain amount of years.
That's true.
Are there other questions?
Yep. I had a question on the whole response to public comment. I mean, we've definitely had nights where we have, 100 people show up for a given issue or a couple given issues, many of whom might have the same comment or similar comment. And I'm wondering if you put thought into defining both what constitutes a response, whether or not the response is individual specific, or if there's a way that can be done when you have a cluster of people around an issue or a similar question. And I guess the last piece of that is within a certain time frame, what constitutes a response, and is there, what would be the mechanism for having teeth on that, and defining, whether or not a response was given, and what's the follow through on that? I mean, if it's by ordinance, then there should be some way of, it's got to have teeth.
Well, so I think, so a couple things. One is, I tried to word it this way, is that addressing each of the concerns raised. So I don't know, I mean, we could see if, maybe our attorney has suggestion. I wouldn't interpret that as, basically going one by one necessarily, but that if there are concerns raised and you want to make sure to address each of them, and if one of them is 10 of them, that's still, if it's one concern, but it was 10 people who suggested it, that you'd be addressing the concern. And that would be, I think that the smarter way to frame it would be to define it in the context of addressing concerns, not addressing people necessarily.
Well, yeah,
right?
Yeah, that would be a concern, because the other side of that is the perception. I mean, you can't really control people's perceptions about whether did he respond to my concern or not, and so that, yeah.
Well, in that point, I mean, there is no answer for that, right? I don't think there's a way to define what a response would be. I could not contemplate how you would fairly do that, because, like you said, someone might say, well, I don't agree with that. You didn't address my concern, right? But that's
so
not.
I guess then it becomes an issue of whether that response is your intention to have that response documented in the same way everything else is in terms of transparency. Because I would think then if that's the case, then maybe the response either has to be here and now, so it's it's on video, et cetera, or it has to be something like an email, so you've got not a paper trail, but you've got a digital trail in order to make that definable and make that also something which is archived for the.
I would think that if so and that provision is in here where if we can't address it at the meeting, that we have 7 business days to get back to the person in writing. To address that comment. Now, I would think that if something were legally challenged, where, for example, if there were a resident who came to, meeting after meeting and brought up a concern and everybody just ignored it, and nobody addressed it and nobody spoke to it, that eventually, you could sue the town, say, well, this town is not addressing my concerns. Here are the video clips, right? Here's me saying a concern. Here's the governing body's response period, and you can see that there's nothing here. And someone is going to, someone would have to make a determination about whether that was whether that was addressed or not.
This is an example of why we need to have this discussion in the committee to vet this.
Well,
There are
I'd like
too
to
many
finish
questions.
actually speaking, thank you. And also, if we held the legal committee meetings, which you canceled again tonight for the third time in a row, then we would have had the chance
Alex, don't
to
go
discuss
there.
it.
Don't go there right
So
now.
to finish addressing your concern, Walter, I don't think there's a great way to define what a response is. The intention of this provision was that basically there is nothing anywhere that says we should even be responding to concerns, right? And so as a first step, the best language that we could think of was that we should make the best effort to address the concerns that were raised. So at least there is an expectation in the law that's when the public comment period is finished, we are expected to then do something to attempt to address those. Whereas right now, we could legally, right, have the public comment period, 100 people could bring up concerns, and we could just move on to approving the minutes, and there's nothing anyone could do about that.
Can I add something
that's
in
an
there?
Unfortunate.
You probably see a lot of this criticism, and I've had this conversation with the school board in South Orange and Maplewood. They generally have the policy that they don't respond back. The comment period is questions, or it could be comments or concerns, but they really don't provide the feedback to the people who took the time to come to a meeting, and they're looking for something from their elected leaders. So I think in principle, it's a good thing to at least encourage, and I don't know what the penalty would be, similar to what Trustee Clark brought up, is if you have another governing body who's like, thank you for your comment. That was your response. But to encourage not only ourselves, but others to take all and necessary, attempts to try and address the people who joined us for a night away from their own home, to improve their community or ask a question or whatever it may be, is probably a good
I'm
good
not
step.
questioning that intention. I'm just trying to think in terms of when you start to take these things to extreme, because there's always going to be limit testers. Where will it break down?
And it's not enforceable, too. This is almost an ordinance on us. And so what are we going to do? Tell ourselves, like, you didn't respond. So we don't have an enforcement agency against ourselves.
No court would interject itself and decide that a response, some audible communication in response to a question was not sufficient. No court would do that.
Well, I think the other component is before you focus on what the response is I'm concerned about the breadth of the term concern. Certainly if a resident asks a question that is susceptible to a factual answer, go get the information and give you the answer. I think that's clear cut. I think if we have it available at the meeting, we should give it to them. If we don't, then you give it to them the next day. If their concern is, I think that's a stupid idea that you're doing, I don't know how you respond to that concern. Whether it's just say, okay, thank you for your comment, or,
Well, I think,
it's
I
defining.
think that's it, right? I mean, because if we were to define what a concern is, then you're going down a road of trying to categorize public comment into what's reasonable and worth responding to and what's not reasonable and not worth responding to. And I don't think we should be in the business of deciding that. So the language is not specific enough, right, that I don't, so it's, the exact language is, at the direction of the village president, the governing body will, at the conclusion of any public comment period of any public meeting of the governing body, make its best effort at addressing each of the concerns raised by a member of the public during such public comment period, making use of best available information to provide a response either at the time of the meeting or in writing within 7 business days to a member of the public who raised the question, seeing as the member of the public leaves appropriate contact information with the clerk to the governing body. So that's the full provision. So if someone comes up and says something that doesn't make any sense or there's no way to respond to, I would think that thanking them for their comment, I mean, that is the response. But I would be very wary of trying to legally define, is it based on fact or is it based on an issue or something like that? Because I actually originally had the word reasonable or appropriate or something like that, and I was like, well, who defines reasonable and appropriate? We probably all have different definitions of that. So leaving it broad certainly leaves a lot of this open to interpretation. But on the other hand, and if someone has a suggestion for better language, I would certainly be interested in that. But the idea would just be to say, okay, in law, we have to do something about responding to people afterwards. It's just a funny thing that, for elected officials, there's very, very few things that are actually required of us to do, right? That are legally required we have to do. And for some reason, responding to public comments at a governing body meeting is not one of them. That should be. So, this is the first step. It's definitely a little vague. It's definitely not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And it's better than right now, theoretically, a space where nobody has to respond to anything. And there are plenty of towns that do that, and it's a shame when you have people that come out to a meeting, and like you said, Trustee Collum, someone might come to a meeting, spend all this time working on a presentation, have their neighborhood show up, make all these comments, and then nothing.
Yeah.
And at the very least, that could be done is to respond and let the person know, at what point they can follow up next, or at least like, I heard your concern and we're working on it. I mean, at least something that they, what they said mattered.
Well, I believe that everyone here has always been responsive, and I don't have a problem with looking to have some codification of how we comply to being responsive to our residents. Again, I canceled the meeting today on behalf of Howard Levinson, who is a critical member of this committee who wanted to be involved in the vetting process. He is home sick. That's why the meeting was canceled.
Oh, he's also given the opportunity to, so. Okay.
I didn't-
All right, so
I did not-
that's fine.
Wait, Alex, I didn't interrupt you. I'm not finished. So, with that said, with this important ordinance, and I really appreciate the effort that you put in, but the process is the work is done in the committee. This belongs in the Legal and Personnel Committee to be vetted. You see all the questions you have, great question.
It does.
Done a lot of work. And since this is going to be something that's going to be codified, it needs to go back to the committee, be vetted in the committee, and then an advice comes out of the committee and discussed with the whole board after it's fully vetted with legal counsel.
When is the
So
next
there
legal
is-
committee meeting going to be?
I will reach out to see when Howard is feeling better, and I will schedule it as soon as possible.
Can you commit to scheduling that before the next board meeting?
I can commit to that.
Great.
The other
And there
thing-
is a motion on the table, and then it has to be addressed.
There is,
Sure.
and I'm about to second it. The other thing is that a lot of the things to your point about the legal committee meetings, is that a lot of the things that are happening in legal right now are being sent to other committees for kind of collaboration and working groups and stuff like that, and I've been fine with that depending on what moves something along a little bit faster. So as long as we're able to, I think we all, I'm taking a nod. We all agree in principle about the ordinance and some of the things in it, and that I'm happy to support anything that makes it more transparent, for the public to get access to information. So why don't we go ahead and let it go to legal? I would agree Howard is probably a good person to tap into a lot of these IT things and the staff responsibility, making sure that we can live up to the expectations because it's a very aggressive ordinance. So with that said, I will second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Trustee Davis Ford to table this to the next board meeting, and that was seconded by Trustee Collum. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. So Trustee Davis Ford, just make sure to let us know when that next legal committee meeting will be. And that has certainly been the intention, has been to vet this through that committee. All right, so moving on. Ordinances for second reading.
Now, we have an additional ordinance 2015-07.
No, that's,
I don't see it.
we're not doing that one.
It's not on.
No.
Was that the design?
Moving right along. Ordinances for second reading, 2015-05. Second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to amend the Code of the Township of South Orange Village, Section 152-34, Schedule 2, with respect to parking on a portion of Meadowbrook Lane.
Great. Seeing this is the second reading of this ordinance, I would like to open this up for a public hearing. So if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak about this ordinance specifically, you can come forward. Okay.
Alex, do you want me to give the backstory on this one before it's voted
but
on?
seeing as there are no members of the public who wish to speak about this ordinance, I will close the public hearing. And if Trustee Collum would like to give the background on it, that would be
Sure.
great.
As you recall, we had the meeting with the West Montrose Neighborhood Association, the leadership there, and one of the concerns was the darkness on this particular portion of Meadowbrook Lane, and the attendance was roughly 30 people, but it was indicative of the Public Safety Committee and the Neighborhood Association and their desires, and they tried to build some kind of consensus. As you can see, this is from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., and the concern was more really late at night. Why are people parked on a residential area that has no homes fronting it? So it became a dark alleyway, commuters walking home late at night. It was really a public safety issue. So this limits any impact on commuters who are using the street and then walking over to the train station. It is supported by the West Montrose Neighborhood Association, and I think we had consensus within the Public Safety Committee and the other departments affected by that. So with that said, I move the ordinance.
Were there any other questions?
I second.
Okay, motion by trustee Column, second by trustee Davis Ford. Can we have the roll, please?
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson and trustee Rosner are absent. Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to our consent agenda.
Okay, resolutions 2015-58 through 2015-67 are on the consent agenda this evening.
Okay, were there any questions or comments on any consent agenda items?
Oh, wait.
And just note that the two resolutions appointing, reappointing our judges got moved to resolution for separate action.
Right, this way.
Okay, there, okay.
I thought I made a note, and
I see,
I didn't.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move.
Moved by trustee
Second.
Column.
Second.
Seconded by trustee Schnall. Can we have the roll, please?
Trustee Davis Ford?
yes.
Trustee Levinson and trustee Rosner are absent. Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Thank you.
No resolutions for separate action?
Resolution 2015-68, resolution reappointing Jonathan Rosenbluth as municipal court magistrate for the Township of South Orange Village with a 2015 annual salary of $42,500.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I move.
Moved by trustee Column,
Second?
seconded by trustee Clark. Can we have the roll, please?
Trustee Levinson and trustee Rosner are absent. Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2015-69, resolution reappointing Clarence Barry Austin as municipal court judge for the Township of South Orange Village with an annual salary of $45,000 to be prorated from February 9th, 2015 appointment date.
I move.
Okay, moved by trustee Davis Ford,
Second.
seconded by trustee Column. Can we have the roll, please?
Trustee Rosner is absent. Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson is absent. Thank you.
And before we move on to the next one, I just want to just make a quick note to thank both Judge Rosenbluth and Barry Austin for serving us, and I think we're all very happy and satisfied with the work that they do in our courts, and very excited to have them officially back on board for 2015.
Okay, resolution 2015-70, resolution authorizing supplemental temporary appropriations for current year 2015.
I move.
Moved by trustee Column,
Second?
seconded by trustee Clark. Can I have the roll, please?
Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson and trustee Rosner are absent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does someone want to
Approval of the bills?
approve the bills?
I will, I mean, there's a language, trustee Levinson has gone through it, but I've looked through it, and I will,
You're on the committee, right?
yes,
Yeah.
so I will move to approve the
I
bills.
second.
Okay, moved by trustee Schnall, seconded by trustee Davis Ford. Have the roll, please.
Trustee Levinson, trustee Rosner are absent. Trustee Schnall?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Column?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Thank you. Before we move on to our reports, would like to open the meeting up for our second public comment period. You guys have been waiting patiently.
Yeah, thanks. First, I want to say thank you for listening and your feedback. Encouraged me to come back and talk again. No, I just want to make two points that came up during your discussion. One about the vision statement from, I think, 2007, 2008. It does specifically address this site that's in question, and beyond the appropriate corridor sliver or the first 125 feet along the corridor, which it does propose to be, whether retail or residential, the back portion it strongly suggests keeping as green space. It might have mentioned community garden or some kind of stronger idea, but very much in the vision that the single-family, two-family zone does not become part of Irvington Avenue corridor. The second thing I want to mention in regards to density and density is density. The way the zoning is currently set up, there's this residential townhouse district. One as you come into the Seton Village and one as you leave. If I'm speaking correctly, it's the only two areas in the whole town that have this special townhouse zone. Now, whether this area becomes more denser apartment-type structures or stays more townhouse zone is, I think, up for play. But I think it's clear that the intention in the current zoning is that these are, 12 units per acre type housing. Townhouse typically implies condominium, typically implies home ownership, typically implies non-transient, whereas we have that kind of development downtown. So I think the intention up until this moment is very clear of the zoning. And with that, items like parking, right? 2.25 parking spaces per unit, current zoning, is critical, particularly with the fact that the streets around that area are narrow. There's not a lot of opportunity for additional parking. And if you're going to build apartment units that have more transient population, that also means more cars and more traffic and these kind of things. So I don't want to belabor it, but I just want to make sure those 2 points, because, again, I can tell you're going to be thoughtful and you're going to be reflecting on this, and I just want to make sure that kind of broaden the perspective. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I guess for the public's benefit, the vision.
Yeah, is there anybody else
sorry.
who wants to speak? Okay, so close public comments.
The last time, because we're talking about the vision plan and what that gentleman said was correct, is if you can recall, there was some green space in the back. But again, when you're visioning too, we don't own the property. It'd be a totally different scenario if it was village owned and we were doing an RFP for a specific type of development. But that is correct. At the last visioning session, I believed, that looked at Irvington Avenue was in 2009 or so is when I think that process kicked off and formally adopted in 2010. And then the next session, I think, was the market research that we did earlier. It's not even this year anymore. It kicked off in the end of 2013 all the way into March of 2014. So those are kind of the, I don't want to say formal planning documents. We have the formal planning document within the vision plan. And then if we go to the smart growth plan, I think what we've gotten from Ms. Gruhl, her planning firm, and also from every reexamination report is that the zoning on Irvington Avenue has been very mixed. Her recommendations were you need to try and create something that's a little bit more consistent because you're having these commercial properties next to a single-family home. It's just not normally what you would see in a district. So in these reexamination reports, it was at her urging to finally deal with the zoning issues that we've had on Irvington Avenue. With a rehabilitation designation, also the potential to create a redevelopment plan. We have those options available, but we also have the option available to just do zoning or just do nothing. There's kind of a wide range of where this can tip either way. So appreciate the comments, and for the folks, I guess, who want to look at the vision plan or get some background on it, that is still posted to the website along with the smart growth plan, the master plan from 1979, and every re-exam every 8 years after that. So there's a lot of points of reference.
Great. All right, so we're going to move on to our reports. I'm going to be very brief. I've just got one item that I wanted to update people on quickly, and that has to do with homelessness. As many people might know, we started closing the train station in South Orange overnight. In part, that was due to increasing concerns around public safety and sanitation, and just from a social welfare perspective of a number of homeless people, a dozen and more on certain nights, that were in our train station. So the train station is now closed from 2 to 5 every night. Our police department has worked with transit in doing that. This was a very long process where we thought about it, went to Public Safety Committee, came back to us, decided to do it. And since that point, Mr. Lewis and I have been working with our police department and with New Jersey Transit. New Jersey Transit has been very cooperative in sending out social workers to the train station before it was closed to make sure that anybody that was there had access to any resources and support that they might need. In that process, and this is an issue that also comes up from at the rescue squad fairly regularly, is a lot of our calls, we end up taking homeless individuals from Maplewood or South Orange to the hospital because that's kind of what is expected to do at this point. And it is a really, really sad and unfortunate, very improper web of services that we provide kind of as a country to homeless individuals, of which there are about 600,000 in the U.S. at any given point, 10% of them who are veterans. And so there's some really interesting things that some cities have done. Phoenix, Salt Lake City have done some really interesting programs where they've almost completely eliminated homelessness with the unbelievably complicated idea of providing people a home to live in. And it's called Housing First, where instead of trying to provide social services and that would get that person out of being homeless, you provide them a home to make them not homeless anymore, and then you provide the social services after that. And it's a pretty well documented, successful way of getting people out of a cycle of homelessness, where they can go from, if something happened where they lost their home or lost their job or some other personal tragedy that put them in this situation, they are now able to be in a home, have access to those services, and then move back out. And that whole process is actually less expensive in no matter how you measure it than the way that we do it in a lot of places, which is basically providing police and medical services to homeless individuals who live outside for most of the year and then go spend time in a hospital. So in working with Transit and a few other organizations and agencies on kind of our issues here, it just got me a little bit more, and a couple more calls to the rescue squad that were involving taking homeless individuals to the hospital. I started to reach out just a little bit more, and I had some conversations, for example, with Essex County, and just trying to find ways, is there more that we can be doing? Is there more that we can do in South Orange? We don't have access to a lot of resources. The county did confirm that the freeholders will be considering a county law that's based off of that's allowed by state statute that allows them to charge a surcharge on certain records transactions at the county level. That money would then populate a homelessness prevention trust fund that would be used countywide to try and prevent homelessness. Mercer County has done a pretty good job of that. There's only 8 counties in New Jersey out of 21 counties actually use this program that's available. So it was great to hear that Essex County is considering doing this. And so hopefully there's a little bit more that we can all do in that regard. One of the concerns that everybody up here expressed, and that we expressed in our Public Safety Committee, that our police department expressed, was, well, if we close the train station, we don't just want to, kick people that are living there out, because clearly they need support. And so there was a very big priority put on making sure that social services were available. So far, the number of individuals that have basically been living in the train station has significantly decreased since the station has started closing, where there might be 8, 10, or 12 in a night, and now there's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 there during the daytime. So what we're also doing is following up with the social workers and trying to get a report on, did these people, are they at another train station, or did they make it to the proper social services? Are they living somewhere? So we're trying to get that information as a follow-up with, was the social intervention successful? And again, is there more that we could do? So that's just something I wanted to make sure to remind and let everybody know that might have been paying attention to the train station closing, that there was a lot of effort by a lot of people to make sure that the social services were put in place, and hopefully that all just kind of reminded us of the importance of this issue, and reminded us that there's probably more that we could all do to do a better job of addressing it as well. So that's the one thing that I just wanted to bring up. Mr. Lewis?
Okay, I had a couple of updates. Village Hall, and this is a brief update on both two components of it. We did receive bids for Village Hall. As you'll recall, we did a pre-qualification project, so there was a potential pool of bidders of 6 pre-qualified contractors, 2 of whom advised in advance that due to their workload and other commitments, they were not in a position to bid. We received 4 bids. The low apparent bidder amount was $5,621,000 and change. That has at this point been at least initially reviewed by the architect and the construction manager, who appear to have indicated, although I have not yet received any formal report or recommendation, but it appears that the low bidder was responsive to the requirements of specifications. At the same time, we are still in the ongoing process of evaluating number of proposals that we received for potential adaptive reuse of Village Hall. We have had a number of meetings and back and forth with those proposers to elicit additional information to allow us, and with the goal towards ideally, and then part of this overall analysis also necessarily includes projecting what we would do with our offices if we didn't go back to Village Hall. So all 3 of those pieces are now coming together. We'll be completing at least that preliminary analysis and sort of financial projections, starting with that template that I had previously provided that had some projections and abilities to plug in the numbers now that we have some of the numbers. Ideally, I would anticipate some level of update at the next board meeting, and as we discussed earlier, I think we should probably consider either a special meeting or a meeting in conjunction with some other special subject that, because of the nature of it and the amount of information and the importance of the issue, I think it warrants that. So we'll just, I guess start soliciting dates. I think there seemed to be consensus that that was a good approach. The 2015 budget, we had tentatively teed up a budget workshop for next Tuesday, March 31st. Unfortunately, I learned yesterday that there's a conflict, scheduling conflict, and so we'll be soliciting dates. We'd like to get that done still relatively soon. Now, whether the 2 of those get combined, that might be a bit much to do in one shot. So I will endeavor tomorrow to get out as many potential dates as I could, and if everyone could please respond, I may do it via the, what's that website that we use? Doodle poll. That seems to be a quick way to get responses than me trying to track emails. The big news, River Greenway project, excited, and I did notify the board. I don't know that it's really been publicized yet, but we did receive, the village president received a letter last Friday relating to a grant. It's an actual federal funding transportation alternative program. It's a grant application that myself and Deputy Administrator Lerner worked on that application last June. We had some valuable input from our village engineer and cost estimating, as well as input from the River Greenway Committee, former trustee Janine Bauer. So it was a real collaborative effort, and we were thrilled to get the award that we were awarded $1 million grant.
Congratulations. Kudos to you.
Yeah, which is great news. It's for a project spanning all the way from Chiswick Field, which is actually in Maplewood but owned by the village, and going all the way to 3rd Street. It will fund almost the entirety of redoing and installing, in some instances, pedestrian path, bike-friendly and bike and pedestrian path, lighting, benches. It's, as many of you are aware, the woods over there are frequently used by students going back and forth to the high school. In what is not now, it's unimproved. It's basically a dirt path. There's no road. So really thrilled with that. Again, thanks to all the staff, Mr. Lerner, our engineer, the committee, the board authorized this, so credit to the board certainly for supporting this. And it dovetails nicely into the other project for which we were awarded the grant last year, which is replacing the pedestrian bridge that crosses the river down by the old water pump house. So we'll be working closely with this new grant is also administered by the state DOT, and actually the same representative. So the engineer has reached out to try and coordinate a meeting, ideally to combine the two potentially to get some economies of scale and a more cohesive approach. But just great news all the way around, and obviously anytime we can get $1 million of free money, it's better than our own money or borrowed money. So, and then last...
free, we pay those taxes too.
This is true. Get our share of it. And then lastly, sort of dovetailing into that, just a brief capital project update and as well a little foreshadowing, and part of this will be in the budget workshop. There will be a much more comprehensive capital budget presentation relating to currently, projects that are already sort of in the works and many of which are already funded, the potential new projects, potential needs for funding sources, and all combined as well with sort of our organizational bandwidth and how many projects can we actually realistically have in the hopper at once. And it's so just to give you a brief update, already sort of in the hopper and funded largely, pretty aggressive road program for this year, which includes complete reconstructions with curbing, new infrastructure, storm sewers, et cetera, Hartford, Toulouse, Blanchard, Crest Circle, Terrell. In addition, some 18 streets are identified for micro paving, which are roads that are in, just need sort of that new layer of asphalt along the top for crack sealing and give them a smooth surface. In addition, we're again going to very aggressively pursue milling and overlaying through the Morris County Co-op, which we started doing. I had done it for a number of years, coming from Morris County, and we joined the co-op and we're eligible to take advantage of that, and that's a very expedient way to get roads paved very cost effectively. Doesn't involve bidding. It's already under co-op, under fixed quantities, so we have teed up a couple of streets to do that on. That's what we did on Spear last year, and they're in, they're out, and it really can give a quick update. So those are all on the schedule already for this year, as well as repairs and upgrades to the duck pond, the skate house, the pedestrian bridge, unless that gets rolled into a bigger project with this new grant that may wind up, we'll see where that one goes. I know the recreation is obtained some information and very interested in looking at the tennis courts. So it's going to be a busy year. Again, I'll have more for you at the budget workshop, because there, in addition to that, independent of sort of building stuff, we have obviously Village Hall and the potential expenditure there. We have the public safety radios that we completed a study on, and we have some grant application pending for the fire component of it, but we're not able to identify any potential funding sources for the police, and that seems to be the most critical need and the ones who have the most problems. So that's obviously a pressing need. So again, it's a little bit of an update on the ones we know are going to be happening, which is good, and a lot of things happening, but also a little foreshadowing that at that budget workshop I will give materials out in advance, but everybody come prepared to kind of think about priorities, think about whether, because of some concerns about the bandwidth last year, and you'll know and recall that we have implemented a policy of trying to only authorize new debt of $500,000 less than we're paying down, to sort of reverse the cycle. We had gotten up to where the debt was over $50 million. We have the last 3 years in the 3 budgets that I've done, we've implemented that policy, paying down more. Last year, in part because of there were so many already in the works that weren't done, we didn't even go that far. We actually only authorized new debt of almost $1 million less than we paid down. So potentially that gives
Howard also did some refinancing too.
Well, it's certainly, all the restructuring of our debt, converting short-term sort of volatile notes into long-term, those have paid huge dividends down the road with enormous cost savings. Again, great credit to Trustee Levison, our financial advisors, bond counsel. But the point being that, as we evaluate and try and deal with these competing demands, some of which, there's a limit to bandwidth, but when you talk about like the public radios, that's not really going to involve the engineering department or roads, so there are things that can go simultaneously. Another thought, and I will include that in all the materials that we want to consider, is, how much do we want to do? Do we authorize more? Do we kind of view, well, we have some additional capacity from last year because we didn't use it, and again, not looking for any commitments tonight, obviously, but just giving you a heads up to be looking for that.
I have a question on the Greenway. I don't know if you can give a timeline, Do you have a sense of the timeline on that project?
Well, I think certainly the pedestrian bridge, which was the $560,000 grant that we got a year and a half ago, was teed up for this summer, and depending on the grant timeline and whether they do or don't, allow any extension to combine the two, that may wind up happening as scheduled. The newly announced grant, the way that process unfolds, it certainly wouldn't be actually, shovels in the ground until the earliest 2016, potentially 2017, ideally, if we can kind of aggressively get it done. And I think we can. It's not to simplify it. It's a lot of money and it's a big project, but most of it's just sort of asphalt pathways on flat ground. Doesn't require a lot of high-tech engineering. So ideally, we can get that one teed up for 2016, and that may warrant and may convince the DOT to kind of merge the two together to do them at once. But
thank you.
that was all I had.
Did you also want to give a very brief overview of a timeline of some of the conversations around Orange Lawn and the zoning ordinance that we discussed?
Yeah, and that was, I think, actually listed on the agenda as a discussion item. But, yeah, just as an update, and people will recall, we had introduced on first reading an ordinance that was largely completely consistent with the existing zoning ordinance on the PRCB overlay zoning that's on the Orange Lawn Tennis Club, only limiting it down to allow it the residential component on 4 acres. Again, that was sort of a preliminary. You start the discussion. What happened was we got a lot of feedback, a lot of valuable feedback, I think both sort of online and via emails and via people coming to the meetings and people calling us. I've had an opportunity, as with the village president, meeting with representatives of the neighborhood group to hear those concerns. I've shared those concerns with the developer, who is very interested in them, thus far indicated a willingness to try and find some common ground in a project. So based on that, there hasn't been, and we've not moved, and we in fact withdrew that initial ordinance. Right now, there is no new ordinance proposed yet because we're still going through that sort of deliberative process, the diligence, getting the concerns of the neighbor. Again, trying to find common ground and see if some, mutually acceptable or palatable agreement can be reached that would address all the concerns. So, for right now, again, we're continuing to get that information. I know the development committee, I think, has taken a look at that, and obviously we want to take their input, and they bring quite a bit to the table. As these meetings unfold, to see what can the developer do to try and address the very specific concerns that the neighborhoods have. I'm hopeful that we can kind of begin to piece together a plan that is, again, appropriate. That would then be presented presumably to the board, I guess, through the Planning and Zoning Committee, with input from the Development Committee. Again, there's no particular timeline or schedule. The developer and the club are both aware of this sort of ongoing process, and every indication I have is they understand it, and they would like to see it completed when it gets completed, but they also understand the importance of doing it right and the need for us to go through this process.
Okay.
The Development Committee is going to be issuing a memo to the Board of Trustees as well. We asked them to take some of the commentary that we got from the residents and also evaluate our first draft compared against what some of the requests were from the residents. So they, at their same special meeting, they're going to discuss some of the things that they came up with, and so the board should be receiving something from the advisory board around April 3rd. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can we, Mr. Lewis, can we, I think for the benefit of the public is the Village Hall situation, because we had kind of communicated we wanted to have a stakeholder group, and then, we realized that when we're negotiating with 2 different people and trying to get the best cost for the village, you can't just throw that out there and say, hey, is there an opportunity that we can share at this point in time what the actual potential uses are, so that we're talking from a land use perspective rather than the actual financial component? Or would you rather, do we have a timeline at which point we can actually share some of the things that we're evaluating internally right now, since we can't put all of that out there right now?
Yeah, I would say that, and again, my timeline, I think, in part because of the time restrictions that we're under with the bids that we received for the Village Hall renovation, is that I would expect by the next meeting, which is April 13th, at that point, we will be in a position to be discussing and publicly indicating this is the bid, this is the way it looks, these are the potential opportunities for where our offices go and what we do if we don't go back to Village Hall, and these are the, I don't know that we'll be at a point where we've now either, narrowed down to even one, but I think at that point certainly identify what the uses are. Once that becomes public, I think then we do want to particularly involve public input and some of the stakeholder groups and, where those potential uses, because, at that point, hopefully we'll have distilled down here the sort of financial criteria that isn't really, it is what it is, but then you get into more subjective, what's an appropriate use, what's a better use, what is or isn't, and that's certainly where I think the stakeholder groups become, much more involved. But I would certainly expect by the next meeting to be in a position.
Okay, good.
Okay. Mr. Rother, is there anything?
Yes, on the waterfront.
On the waterfront?
On the waterfront.
Sounds nice.
I could have been a contender.
I had a meeting with the folks from New Jersey American Water with regard to the construction of the new interconnection. They have put out an RFP for an engineering firm to design that system. They told me that just as soon as the preliminary work starts, they're going to be meeting with the Farrell Field Conservancy folks to share with them some thoughts about the precise location of that pumping station and what it might look like. And of course, that whole process is going to get a review in front of the planning board at some time in addition, but they have agreed in advance, well in advance of that planning board process, to meet with the local folks and get their input. They also advised me that they're planning to finish the project next year, this year, excuse me, by the end of this year, which is really good news because, as you all know, our cutover starts January 2017. So that gives them an entire year to do testing. And it's important from another perspective, too, because I have finished the RFP and the contract, the draft contract for the operations and maintenance contract we're going to have to let. And that contract is going to have two phases, a phase one and phase two. Phase one will be the period of time before we cut over to the new water source, so that this company will have enough time to participate with New Jersey American in the testing of the new system, so that when the day finally comes, we know there are no glitches. There will be a whole year to make that work and work well, and give the company a chance to really understand our system, to draft standard operating procedures, and do all of the good stuff that you should do before you finally take control of a new system. And I hope Trustee Levison recovers quickly, I would like to have the Water Committee review the RFP and the contract that I've drafted this week sometime, if not early next week, so that we can go out with that. At the same time, our consultants, HDR, are now in the document collection phase of the preparation of their system condition study, which is also an important thing for us all to have, so that the new O&M
Sorry, can I stop you for a second? Did we just lose quorum? So we'll wait until Trustee Davis Ford gets back?
Well, that's only for action, so, right?
True, only for action. Would you like to continue?
Yeah, it's just informational. It's just informational.
Okay. No, but technically we are still in our meeting.
Yeah.
It's not like the conference agenda where we didn't.
Yeah,
So.
but this is simply informational.
Okay.
We can wrap this up. They're in the document collection phase of the system condition study that they're going to be doing. Along with the system condition, they're going to be doing a 10-year capital investment plan as well, so that we understand over the course of the next 10 years where we should be spending money to make the system function the way it should. And that, of course, is an important document for the O&M operator to have and to better understand the condition that they're receiving the system in. And that's where we are.
Do you have a sense of time frame for the RFP that they're putting out in order to do the design piece of it? Do you know?
They didn't. They indicated that they would have a firm selected fairly shortly, because they wanted this spring to be in a position where they could really begin to do some work.
Yeah, I just hear the word RFP and
Pardon?
hear RFP as a term, and they say they also want to have it built this year, and it's kind of hard to believe. But.
No, they're not constrained the way we are.
Okay.
I mean,
All right.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Clark?
Some of this, I have to say, the freshness is not quite what it could be. We kind of got out of our sync as far as who reports when, and so, for instance, part of the code enforcement report was around Tony and his hip surgery and snow removal, which...
No more.
Yes.
No more.
Yes. Hopefully that is no longer an issue. I may have just jinxed it.
Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah.
I think you did. And it's on public record. Please note that in the minutes.
Exactly.
Walter Clark.
Precisely. So it's all on Trustee Clark. Anyway, so Tony is also back, and for those of you who haven't seen him hobbling around, he's recovered and he's back in action. Also not the freshest information, but the trash and recycling bins downtown. We were discussing that. Barry, I don't know if you want to weigh in on any extra details on that. But the Public Works was also working on the line of sight ordinance and refining that as well. Ludington Brook, which we continue to wrestle with any kind of a solution there. Pump house and bridge plans, Barry also touched on. And the parking restrictions, Trustee Collum also touched on. As far as lighting requests on that same stretch of road, we have had some motion there. And Sheena, just so you know, the numbers we've gotten back look really pretty good. Still waiting for some information on what it would cost to remove other lights, but it looks like because it's a relatively simple install in that area, we actually have electricity there, which is nice. It could be pretty inexpensive, and also we required LED lights, which are relatively new for PSE&G to be using, but they really reduce the actual distributed energy costs quite a bit. So hope to be able to present some numbers at the next meeting, and hopefully people smile. Let's see, the Community Coalition on Race, they're going to have a busy month coming up in May. They have a couple things going on, one of which is the next Community Conversation on Race event, which will feature Michael Jeffries, who's an associate professor of American Studies at Wellesley College, and that's May 13th, and as of the location is TBD still, as of the last meeting. Also, their Cultural Heritage Festival, which they had the inaugural one last year, the follow-up this year is May 16th, 11 to 5 p.m., and that's going to be in Maplewood Memorial Park again. So that's, for those of you who don't recall it, you can enjoy the foods of many cultures, experience performances by ethnic dancers and musicians, and shop for crafts and merchandise from around the world, and admission is free. I'm also glad to report that the Energy Policy Committee has a new chair, Eric Hoffert, who you've already engaged with, and they're helping out with working on the Essex Community Energy Outreach Project, which I'll get into a little bit more. They are also working a little bit with South by South Orange development. Let's see, the Environmental Commission also coming up on a pretty busy period. My favorite, River Day, is May 3rd this year, so put that on your calendars. I expect to see all of you in waders out there. So May 3rd, 11 to 4 p.m. This year a little different. We're going to have the headquarters at Floods Hill in anticipation of the Duck Pond area maybe being a little bit messier than usual. We've also had a new burst of energy on the Environmental Commission from new members Patricia Canning and Ritu Pancholi, who I want to thank both for their recent just addition of energy to the overall thing. One of which Patricia Canning has started an environmental film series, the first of which is this Thursday. So if anybody's sitting around Thursday night, a free showing of the film Bagot. And she will be kicking off an initiative to try to help people reduce their plastics consumption. So a plastic cleanse of sorts. And the film Bagot is, I guess technically it's a documentary, but it's basically when a man considers the amount of plastic he uses in his life, and it actually changes his life. So I encourage you to see that. South Orange Public Library, March the 26th, 7 p.m., and it is free. Let's see. Another initiative, which we're excited about, which seems to be getting some traction, so act quickly, residents of South Orange, is a free tree seedlings, or saplings, I guess, technically, free tree saplings for South Orange residents through the New Jersey Tree Recovery Campaign. The South Orange Environmental Commission and Green Team will be distributing free tree saplings to South Orange residents. Those seedlings and saplings, they're going to be 2 to 4 feet tall. We don't yet know what the actual species of trees will be, but you can sign up on a Sign Up Genius to be one of the recipients of that. And just to specify, this is specifically for South Orange residents, and it's for plantings on residential property. And again, free. Let's see, actually, there's, what I will encourage you to do is go to the village website to get the full amount of information on that one. Just because it's a ridiculous link to try to explain.
You don't have that memorized?
No, it's not very memorizable, unfortunately. Lastly, the green teams of South Orange, Milburn, and Maplewood have been collaborating for a while, and one of those initiatives which is being rolled out is the Essex Community Energy Project. The state of New Jersey has a program called Home Performance. I am popping all over the place here. Called Home Performance with Energy Star. And basically that allows homeowners to receive rebates up to $5,000 and interest-free financing up to $10,000 for energy upgrades to residential properties. And so the 3 green teams are actually working as Essex Community Energy. It's a website you can go to basically try to help you understand this particular state program, but it also has basically there's sort of an Angie's List kind of a thing, because there are particular providers who you can have come to your home to do that initial energy audit, do blower tests, things like that, see what types of things you would need in your house to improve the energy efficiency. And so this allows people weigh in with their experiences with those individual groups, and it helps you to pick it out and hopefully understand the whole program.
Do we have that on our website? This program?
We don't. I've been remiss, I think, in forwarding that. I'm going to have to get on the
we should get that up there, too.
Yeah. Lastly, the Green Team is still looking for members who want to help out with either recertification within Sustainable Jersey or with River Day or any of the other projects that the Environmental Commission and the Green Team are working on. And if you're interested, riverdaystaff@gmail.com. Again, riverdaystaff@gmail.com. Send an email there saying you were interested in joining up.
Great. Thank you. Were there any other committee updates?
I don't have a committee update, but
I think it was Howard's turn as well, and that may be.
Howard's normally on for the first meeting, and then the rest of us are the second meeting normally,
I think it was Mark.
Mm-hmm. Mark was on for
Mark.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to just take a brief time to let folks know that we are right now in the middle of a call for participation for South by South Orange. Again, the dates for that are going to be June 26th, 7th, and 8th. That's the last weekend in June. But over the next 2 weeks, we would like to really complete the programming. And just as a reminder, South by South Orange is sort of a derivative based on what's been going on. Actually, anybody who's been looking at the papers, down in Austin, Texas, actually it's been going for over 20 years, is South by Southwest, but we have our own version of it. It's modeled somewhat after that program, and what it will be is it's a combination of interactive sessions, mainly around technology and creativeness. There'll be community art projects as well as music. And some of it will appear on this stage, in the loft, and throughout SOPAC, as well as on Seton Hall's campus and other venues throughout South Orange. So again, where we are in the stage right now, over really for the next week or two, there is a call for participation in any of those categories under the theme of creative collisions. That's really what we're going by, and some of the sessions that we already have people who are submitted proposals are very exciting. I hope to and will be able to share that with you on a website in the next few weeks. For those of you who have any interest in presenting any of those sessions in music, creative arts, or technology, feel free to reach out to me. You can use my email address, schnall@southorange.org, and I'd be happy to share more information.
All right, I have something under new business, if we're there.
Yeah, unless there's any other trustee reports. Okay, we did have an item that was already listed, though, so I don't know, Mr. Lewis, is there anything that you wanted to add about the Valley Street redevelopment?
Yeah, and I didn't know whether to do it at the same time. We kind of jumped ahead because the residents were here specifically on Irvington Avenue, but along the lines of the same discussion that we had about a conditional redeveloper designation, we've similarly been approached by an entity that has contracts to purchase a number of properties on Valley and 4th Street, right in that vicinity, actually to the west of Valley, going down 4th Street, actually on both sides of the street. Again, we have the opportunity to approach that through a redevelopment plan. The next step, and some of the preliminary materials that they've provided, which again is only their concept proposal, has been shared with the board. And again, and we didn't sort of formally get this, but I'm just looking for generally consensus on both that one and the Irvington Avenue to ask redevelopment council to prepare the resolutions doing that conditional designation of redeveloper. Again, does not, for the public's benefit, certainly the board's aware of it, but does not approve or authorize anything. It just sort of starts the formality of the dialogue, and equally from my perspective, who has to put together the budget, they have to put up the money to pay for the costs. So, unless there's any particular objection, what I'd like to do is have those on for the next meeting agenda, those two resolutions.
Yeah, we want them to start paying.
Sounds like it. Okay, Trustee Davis Ford.
Under new business, I want to pass down these. I printed from the Maplewood South Orange. I went to the budget hearing, Board of Ed, last Monday, and I'm just going to really focus on the third page from the back. And I think these are concerns that we've had and we discussed, and I just wanted to make sure the whole board is aware of it and our residents. And this is the percent overall increase and what it means in actual dollars. And I think there's a disparity here between what South Orange pays and what they're going to receive in an increase based on the school budget in Maplewood. As many of you are well aware, it's a shared school district and it's based on a state-mandated formula. And the determination of what each municipality pays is based on the aggregate or the average property value of housing in each town. South Orange housing values are higher on average or as an aggregate than Maplewood. So the proposed assessed dollar value for Maplewood is $121 for the tax increase. And for South Orange, it's $253, more than double. The significance to this, or the disparity for this, in my opinion, is even greater because we only send 40% or less of the students to the school system.
33.
33? So it's significant. And we pay more than 40% of the cost for those students.
47.
47? So it's really, really a real concern. So my point in bringing this up is that this is something that we really, really need to weigh in on. We need to, there's really no relief for us unless we get this formula for the school district to change. That means that we have to talk to our assembly people, our state senator, to lobby for a change in the way it's funded. I've heard some discussions with people to the point that they're so upset by this disparity in what we have to pay regarding the amount of students that some of them even said, why don't we separate from our school district from Maplewood? Well, I think that's a little extreme. But this is something that I think that we need to start having a discussion with our legislators in Trenton to see if we can address this type of formula that is used to determine what we pay to the school district. Most municipalities, since the funding of the school district is based on property values, pay a significant part of their taxes, residents, to the school district. In South Orange, we're close to 60%, and based on the way that the taxes are sent to the school district and the structure we have, the state determines what we send to the school district, and once it goes to the school district, we have no control on how that money is allocated or spent. But I want to make it clear that personally, I believe in a strong public school system. That is the quality of our community, quality of our life, and we should invest in our students. But there's got to be a better way and more equity and a fairer way for South Orange in the way that our funds are allocated and sent to the school system. The other thing that I'd like to request is that we reinstitute a liaison meeting with representatives from this board with the school district. That used to exist, and I don't know if it changed as a result of the elections moving from April to May, and we eliminated the Board of School Estimate. But sitting in that meeting, it just it made sense to me that we really need to reinstitute some sort of monthly or quarterly meeting with representatives from this board with the school board. And finally, I think I'm also concerned that it is hard for any one of us to attend the school board meeting because they have the school board meeting many times when we're meeting. Our meetings are set on the second and fourth Monday. They have their meetings often on one of those Mondays. And since there are 2 other Mondays in the month, and we send 60% of our taxes to the school board, it would seem that they would take into consideration of scheduling their board meetings on a night that we are not here in our meetings, and any one of us who chooses to, on behalf of the residents, could be in attendance. So those are some of the things that I wanted to bring up regarding my concerns with our taxes that are allocated to the South Orange and Maplewood School District.
That was deep. That's a lot of stuff. I wouldn't mind taking the lead, and I can work with Deborah, and we'll do it through legal and personnel. If the board, and I think we've discussed this before, the relationship, having the liaison, we need to start working a lot closer than we do right now. One of the things I was thinking about also was having somebody from the Board of Education be a liaison to our development committee, too. we have a lot of stuff that's going on in South Orange. I think Maplewood has equally as much stuff going on, and we're just really all sort of interconnected together. So I'm happy to work with Deborah, Alex, and the administration on structuring, whether it's bringing back what used to exist or actually creating something that's better than what used to exist. And I know that talking to members of our Board of Education, they certainly welcome that. And I think the sooner we can do that, the better, especially since we're both in the middle of budget cycles right now. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Was there anything else?
So small, so small. So we were supposed to have an ordinance for first reading at this meeting on the first round of code review suggestions to the Board of Trustees. One of the ones that we thought we would be introducing didn't get introduced. So expect at the next meeting, it's going to be signage, awnings, and also the creation of the Design Review Board. We're hammering out some details on how we can remove authority, less from the zoning court, more to administration, so that we can empower the design professionals to be able to make decisions without making business owners have to come spend a lot of money in front of a Board of Adjustment to make a change of 2 inches on their lettering. We'd much rather move that a little quickly through the professionals on the Design Review Board, and then also that ties into the matching grant program. So goal is now next meeting for introduction on those first round of proposed changes.
Great. And can we also ask our planner, Ms. Gruhl, to opine on our codes so we can get moving a little bit on that as well? As you know, it was part of the volunteers, but I think we need some help, some professional help on that to get it going.
She's reviewing all the ones on the signage ones.
Not just the signage. I'm talking about the downtown business district and some of the codes related to that we began as volunteers, but I think we need some professional help on as well.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
I move to adjourn.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Schnall.
Third.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Good night.
Yeah.